Hi everyone, it's Josh Schultz, and I just wanted to take an opportunity to welcome you again to the class and to offer some of my own thoughts on the readings and on the topic of multicultural education today. Through this course, I'm not going to offer a traditional lecture, but it's really important for me to be present and with you online. I wish we could all be together, because this would be a great course to be face-to-face, but distance and time have kept us apart. But here we are. So what I wanted to say that you're reading a text by Sonia Nieto and others, but Sonia is a former professor of mine and really one of the top-notch professionals in multicultural education for linguistically and culturally diverse students. So when I say that, I'm not going to regurgitate what she had to say because she said it all. So that's really going to be, the reading is really going to be the center of the work in this class. I just wanted to offer some of my own reflections and thoughts on the topic of multicultural education today. And as you know, everything, as Sonia says, really education takes place in a context, right? And my own teaching context involved working in elementary school settings with linguistically diverse learners. I've done that in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Poland, post-communism, early 90s. I worked with linguistically diverse students in Florida, in Central Florida, and throughout the 90s and early 2000s. I worked in Boston public schools as a teacher and as an ESL teacher in K-12 settings, and worked with supporting teachers before I moved into professional development and then eventually higher ed. So I have some experience in this work that I'd really like to share with you. I think as I was rereading Sonia's text, and this is her third edition, so I've read the first edition and the second edition and the third edition, and each time I read it, I think of new things. But I think of my own approach, an evolving approach to multicultural education over the years. As a younger, I shouldn't say younger, let's say as a less experienced teacher, I entered the classroom when I think about teaching second grade in Florida, I made every effort to be a multicultural educator, but my perspective on multicultural education was really aligned with the holidays and heroes. I don't kick myself for that. I think it's really better than nothing. But of course, it's not multicultural education. It's really very much surface culture. Things like food and holidays, even peppering our classroom lectures with a few phrases in students' first languages is not multicultural education, although sometimes it can be positioned as that. I started teaching when I was in second and third grade class, but multicultural education, I won't say it was just holidays and heroes, because I was really motivated more on a desire to teach geography and to teach and really to emphasize geographic enlightenment for my students. I was really saddened by the fact that some people don't even know where other countries are on the map. So I think I kind of use multicultural education as a way to present some of the history and some of the procedures and ways of life of cultures that I had had an opportunity to visit. So I think in a critical perspective, I see that I had an opportunity to really investigate culture deeply, but I didn't. I I positioned my students, who were primarily Puerto Rican students, who had been born in New York, the Puerto Rican diaspora that Nieto discusses has a firm presence in Central Florida, and so I had a great opportunity to be able to work with a number of second generation mainlanders, right, whose parents were from Puerto Rico. I had a number of students from Trinidad and Tobago, and a number of students from Haiti. And I think in retrospect, I can see that I positioned those students as the other and as being exotic in a way that I wanted to welcome them, that I never examined my own culture or positioned my own culture as one that needed to be celebrated. And we all have to do that. I think sometimes if we were, I'm a white male, so I'm a member of a dominant class here that has a lot of privileges in our culture. And I never really critically examined that or considered myself as having a culture. But as Sonia points out, those of us who identify ourselves as white, middle class, do have culture, and that needs to be examined as critically as any culture is. What are our viewpoints? What are our thoughts? How has our experience led us to be the person we are today and the teacher we are today? And how does that influence our way of thinking, our way of knowing, and the choices that we make in our classrooms? Because all teaching is a political act. We know that in what we choose to teach, what we choose to highlight, and what we choose to leave out, and what we choose to emphasize, all of those things are influenced by who we are as a person, as a so as a member of society. All right, so I just wanted to say that was one of my reflections that I had. I think the other major point that I've seen, and is this, in my experience in education, has been this emphasis and shift to a standards-based reform movement that's really taken hold in education. So when I started teaching second and third grade, really I created my own curriculum. I created all my own lesson plans. And sometimes I say the more I learned about teaching, the harder it was to be a good teacher. And that is true and not true in some ways. The more I learned about pedagogy and techniques and strategies to serve as English language learners, emergent bilinguals, I certainly became a more skilled teacher. But other times I felt really like kind of bogged down by the constraints of curriculum and curriculum mapping and standards and objectives and units and lesson planning, etc. All of that, those are important parts of being a professional educator, but we can never lose sight of why we're teachers. And we're teachers to service and support and celebrate and ensure the success of every student in our class. So if you really want to connect with your students, get to know your students, spend time every moment of the day that you're with them, asking them questions, assuming nothing about their lives. And if you find yourself at the end of the day kind of grumbling like we all do, it's okay. We can think about, why do I feel this way about a certain group if it's negative? And then you have to examine, why is that happening? You have to think about about why we are, what has led us to believe that. And I think that's the truth about being a multicultural educator, is being that reflective in our practice. I'll leave you with a quick illustration of a aha moment that I had. This was with one of my students. Her name was Ruth. And Ruth was she was a Haitian student. She had been born in Haiti, but she had come as a baby. She had to the U.S., Central Florida. She had a number of brothers and sisters. Ruth was late for school every single, at least 4 times a week. And it would drive me bananas, quite frankly, because late for school, then that, I think that I felt that was sending a message to other students about punctuation and tardiness, etc. We didn't have any buses or anything like that, so students were walking to school. I tried to reach out to the parents. The parents did not speak English. I did not speak Haitian Creole nor French, so communication was difficult. And I'm not saying I exhausted every measure of communication, but long story short, at the end of the school year, and I liked Ruth very much, I should say. She was really a spitfire personality for a 9-year-old. She'd take nothing from anyone. She was really a great kid. But anyway, at the end of the school year, I had the opportunity to meet her dad. And her dad came to me and he told me that he was a tech. He had been a professional, a doctor in Haiti. When we had moved to the U.S., he was working as a cab driver. Education was of utmost importance to him, and every morning he would work the night shift, and every morning he'd gather his kids around the table, the breakfast table, and he would make sure that they had completed their homework, and then he would augment their lessons with his own knowledge about everything that he knew, right? And he would also be teaching them French and making sure they could read and write French. So when he shared that with me, I told him, gee, they're late for school. He told me that was why, and he apologized profusely for tardiness, but he said sometimes that those lessons took precedence, and I totally understood that. But there I was, and that was my aha moment. I realized, assuming that this parent wasn't involved, or assuming that there was something dysfunctional about their family life, was something that I shouldn't have done. Doesn't make tardiness any less of a problem, but it certainly puts things in their perspective. So our life in teaching is a series of aha moments. The lesson being, we learn not to assume and to ask questions and know our students. And I hope you'll do the same in your own practice. And I hope that you're enjoying the readings and the discussion. So have a great week, and feel free to add to your posts and send me any questions that you have.